backed by sort of the, if nothing else, the financial security that is Cisco, there's a lot of benefit to that. So it's interesting to sort of see where the business has gone in the last 8 years, but MV is a perfect example, right, of a new product line. Cisco had started to sunset their vSUN product. We came out with this new MV product, which sort of, again, reinvents our entry into the market and how we're taking a look at it. And as far as Cisco is concerned, great. Like, now we have a new product that people really like, so be it. Why put a bullet in that horse, right? Like, we can just keep it going. And that's sort of been my experience so far. It's been nothing but good the past 8 years. I have no complaints whatsoever. The product does well. The technology gets better. We're moving up market at lightning speed. It's all coming up roses for Meraki.
Yeah. I mean, when I was there, when we made the acquisition, it's important to know is like, the perception was that there were outsiders coming into Cisco, right? Not independently. Obviously, I knew Matt prior, but it was, okay, what is Meraki bringing besides just a really cool piece of technology in the cloud, right? It's not, traditional Cisco. They acquired the culture of Meraki, which is infectious across the board, right? It is just an incredible cultural shift, just not in personnel, but also the tech they had acquired. But one thing that, if you've kind of been listening to Matt really carefully, we don't build features at Meraki. We build solutions, right? That's kind of like our mantra. And that was very foreign for us to hear, even before MV was part of the discussion, right? Before we actually had cameras at the Meraki piece. And seeing that, making that one thing work when you press the one button they were proving that to us. And we were all just dumbfounded, for that matter, just seeing it work. And then when MV came out, the idea that we can do the exact same thing with video surveillance, and I was selling the older type of architecture with Cisco, right? And competing in that market. Now I saw something that just made sense. The passion resonates across the product. And it was very important to see that as the transition of them becoming Cisco'd, right, from Meraki. And it was just really cool, right, in that context. Important.
So let's kind of zero in here on the security element. You talked, Matt, earlier in segment 2 about the Secure Connect topology and what have you, and some customers throwing up their hands, looking at all these headlines of hack after hack after hack after hack from the internet, and some CEOs and CISOs saying the only way to insulate yourself from the internet is get off the goddamn thing, right? So you have some, end users that have gone the direction of a private cellular network, to get that security. So is Secure Connect compatible with that element of with that topology of communications out to your edge devices? I mean, how does that? Can you have your cake and eat it too? There, it's
a good point. So I think when you're looking at security, you can sort of subdivide it into 2 main categories, right? There's external threats and there's internal threats. When it comes to internal threats, even physical internal threats, right? I went to a customer once who told me, looked me straight in the eye and said, "I don't trust the cloud because the cloud is not secure. I don't own the cloud, so I can't trust it." And while we were having this conversation, by the way, there was no lobby ambassador or anyone sitting at the front desk. I just walked right into the building. There was nobody who asked me who I was. I just found my way to the conference room and sat down. As we were talking, I could see a network closet that was propped open with a cinder block because the cooling system wasn't working and the door was open. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, I could just walk into that door, right? Like, you're worried about the cloud security aspect of a multi-million-dollar, SaaS secured cloud that has to go through all these certifications and penetration testing, and have physical security with, 2-factor and biofactor and armed guards. And you're worried that it's less secure than the closet you've got propped open with a cinder block and no security between your front door and that closet. Like, really take a second to think about what you're saying here. So from the internet bound threat, that's always going to be a challenge, right? The folks that are using those attack vectors are always going to be in lockstep, if not a step ahead of the industry, and we're always going to be chasing them, right? So the best thing you can do is early detection, right? And then making sure once those threats are known is limiting your exposure to those threats as quickly as possible. And that's a huge piece of what we were talking about earlier when it comes to doing the upgrades. Right. Once you're notified that there's a threat or that there's a new vulnerability out there, going through the process of then securing your external, paths of entry, that's got to be super easy, right? You've got to be able to click a button and have all those things upgraded. You can't go through a process where it's now going to take you 8 months of prep to do 3 months worth of security. By then, you've already been hacked, right? You took too long, and that's the whole conversation with external. With internal threats, devices still need to be able to talk to each other internally, right? You still need to be able to bring things onto the network. That's where Secure Connect comes in. Locally, in a single location or in multiple locations, those devices still have to get access to each other and access to the internet, or access to a network rather, and then access to other resources, so on and so forth. And I think doing some of this edge security in terms of encryption at the edge, encryption during transport, it helps sort of embolden those types of technologies, even inside of private cellular connections, right? Because even inside of those connections, there's still going to be components that have access. And just sort of by way of quick example, there was a retailer who I'm sure many of you will figure out who I'm talking about when I say what I'm about to say, who got hacked not through an external, internet-bound attack, but through their heating and cooling system. And they were able to jump over to their credit card management system. And that heating and cooling system, you could do private cellular all day long, but if your building management folks chose to go with a heating and cooling vendor that have their own connection to the internet, or have some kind of vulnerability that you're not protecting internally, it's just another door, right? It's just another hole in the network. So you have to be aware of both, right? You have to limit your exposure to your internet-bound threats and your external threats, but you also have to pay attention to your internal threats. Are you locking your windows and doors at night? Kind of a thing.
So for the last question, we got to wrap up, but sort of a relatively quick point. So is Meraki working with other global developers, with respect to, some obviously more information is going to be pushed through, more capability, higher bandwidth. So that's going to become problematic. There's going to be questions that are going to be asked. How do you guys address those efficiencies?
Well, we address the efficiencies with the architecture itself. I mean, but to answer your first question about, ecosystem partners, of course, when it comes to, the camera and the analytics that we can extract, or the data that we can extract from the camera and give it to an analytics company, and they can make, business intelligence processes to give to customers. That is certainly available today in the context of what the camera can do. But the architecture, it kind of, at least from the MV and our architecture, defines and kind of extinguishes the bandwidth concern generally, right? If you obviously you guys had done a little research on the product itself. If you notice that all of our cameras, the entire compute mechanism is on board at the edge, right? It is a compute mechanism. It is a storage mechanism. It is a image processing mechanism. It also has a chipset that is very similar to what we find in cellular phones, right? So it is basically an entire system at the edge, right? And it doesn't, in a sense, broadcast video exponentially, as live stream normally would in, what I call terrestrial type of video surveillance systems. It is only on demand, and it's only one, at 1-to-1 type of to viewing ratio. So your bandwidth constraints are really non-existent. That's why we can basically scale as fast as we had in such a short term, is because, most of our customers have identified that as usually a big problem, which is the reason why you brought it up, that when they're making a new, purchase in an IP surveillance system, the edge looks so attractive to them because now they don't have to worry about building an infrastructure to support just the bandwidth alone to get high quality video when necessary.
Yeah. To add on to that, I would say that the integrations that we're looking to do with ecosystem partners are sort of more business outcome focused than they are, point product focused, right? We're less interested in supporting another vendor's cameras on our network because that doesn't really add the value that we want to the business outcome of, I want to know, I had this ability, for instance, right, the MV camera to detect cars. Well, that's great, but that's really all it does is just detect cars. It doesn't really go beyond that. So there's a number of ecosystem partners that we work with that can do things like, I want to count the number of cars and tell you if there's spots available. I want to tell you if someone's been waiting in a drive-through line for X amount of time. Those are things that we can enable, but we don't do natively, right? We have to use ecosystem partners to be able to do some of that stuff. Now, if you were to say to me, yeah, but I've got this very specific camera that I want to bring onto your system, well, the business outcome of that is not really as valuable as, the business outcome of adding a camera to the system is not nearly as valuable as adding, what do we actually want to get out of this system, right? What is the process, or what is the data that we actually want out? So most of the ecosystem integrations we're doing today are not camera vendors or NVR vendors or anything really in the traditional competitive space. It's more in the business outcome space. It's more in being able to do things like, social distance monitoring or capacity planning or contact tracing or, something more where the partners that we were working with, are building these platforms to enable us to get data rather than sort of hardware integrations, if that makes sense.
So those analytic developers are making their case of the why, and that's the judgment that you're using as to which ones to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just in the greater Meraki sense, just during the pandemic over the last few months, we've added about 28 COVID-specific apps to the Meraki App Store for addressing a need that didn't exist, just a handful of months ago. We had customers coming to us and saying like, hey, what do I do? The governor of my state just said I'm only allowed 50% of the people in my retail chain, and I've got 100 of these locations. How the heck am I going to manage that? Like, how do I know if I'm in compliance? We say, like, check out the Meraki App Store. All you have to do is like press this button and boom, now you got a dashboard that tells you, what your capacity is for every site. You didn't have to roll out a whole bunch of hardware and take, 6 months to do it, right? You asked for it on Monday and it was up and running by Friday and you're good to go.
Well, that agility certainly is very, very attractive because who knows what tomorrow is going to bring, right?
Correct. That's also the component of VSaaS in general, video software as a service in general. The idea that, paying a monthly subscription fee for a device seems, quite foreign to especially traditional physical security buyers. But as an added benefit to that, you are getting those types of upgrades, right? Or access to those types of upgrades from those fees that you're buying because you're basically, supporting the idea that we can go out and find ecosystem partners for you to be able to do these types of things. That's exactly what VSaaS, the business model is designed around. It's important to know that.
Well, I'd like to thank both Matt Shaner and Matt Moreno for being our guests today. This has been very, very enlightening, very engaging. You have been listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by myself, Jim Henry, and Sal Lafreri. We ask you to subscribe to this show and like us on our social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you are interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to the webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. Remember, you can hear the show on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, and of course, stream it at theriskadvisor.com. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you tune in again next week.